Now, before I deal with the judgment, I thought it would be appropriate to first express my gratitude to everyone that assisted us in being able to bring justice closer to the people, and that we can serve this community in a proper way, but also in an attempt to bring justice to Joshlin, the missing child. In no particular order, I'm going to name certain persons. Doesn't mean that I don't appreciate everybody's assistance that we had through the course of this trial. It didn't go unnoticed to me that every morning when I arrived at the venue, there were a group of mothers that were praying outside. And I'm sure they weren't the only ones that kept us in their thoughts and their prayers during the course of the difficult time for all of us. I appreciate that. I visited this venue on the 5th of February this year for the first time. When the matter came into our system, closer to the end of last year, it was decided that I will preside over the trial. And in the exercise of my discretion, I thought it would be appropriate to come here, not particularly to the venue, but the area. So you will realize that between the 5th of February and 3rd of March, when this trial resumed, was less than a month. During that period, we also had the issue of the respective proclamation to proclaim this venue as a court. And I wish to express my appreciation for then our very new Judge President, Abita O'Connor, that immediately bought into the idea, supported it, and ensured that we could proclaim this venue as a court before the end of February. And it was done. At that visit, there was still a lot of uncertainty from the local authority whether they would allow us to use the venue for various reasons, but there was no opposition once I explained the decision. And from that day on, we had the full support of the local authority. Everybody would have realized that we're using a sound system. And Mr. Marman over there became known through this trial as Fergus. And Ms. Adams next to him. All of this that you see was provided by local government. I noticed the presence of General Patkile above there. But within a week, instructions were given from the provincial office of SANS to support us. And you would have seen that was told by the staff of the Office of the Chief Justice that an operational plan has already been developed. We all know of the strain the South African Police Service is under in serving the communities. And yes, one doesn't want too much of a show of force in a court setting. But everybody took it seriously, and thank you, Commissioner, to you and your members, Colonel Woodley and the team, that we hear a lot of sacrifices were made during the course of this trial. Officials had to get up in the early hours of the morning and put in the extra hours and leave their families because they had to go to Malmesbury every day to fetch Mr. Apollos and Mr. Smith to have them here on time. And we started at 8:30 in the morning. I'm sure on those days that we sat late, they got home after dark. I appreciate the assistance. I went through a difficult time with my health during this period, and people need not be too concerned about it. It's merely an underlying condition that's exacerbated by environmental effects. But we have the Provincial Department of Health here in the areas that could assist us, that the trial could proceed. At the time when Ms. Smith fell ill, they were at hand. At the time when Ms. Lombard, one of the state witnesses, fell ill, they were here. Our own internal office, which represents the Office of the Chief Justice, through the provincial head, acting head, Ms. David, and particularly Mr. Roscoe Bessel, who was our acting court manager at the time, pulled out all the stops. Witness dog had to be procured from another government department, the Department of Justice, the National Department. We attempted to procure an accused dog. I decided to pick up the phone to ask SAPS to assist us to transport it, and unfortunately it was too small when we got here. It might sound small things, but what it taught me of how local government, provincial government, national departments work together in ensuring that we achieve the ideals of restoring human dignity in our Constitution. I hope this is a good example of what we as a people can achieve if we work together. The community of Saldanha came up at times in numbers. I have in quite a long career seldom seen people so disciplined. On the first day or two, Mr. Marman indicated to me that people were leaving their paper wrappers in the courtroom, placed a strain on the cleaning staff. I addressed the court goers who never had a problem with me. The behavior of people in the court and the way they rallied behind us to support us in what we do showed of a community that cares. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in the judgment program. I appreciate it when I make requests to Mr. Paulus, Mr. Van Reyden, and Ms. Smith to bite the bullet and not have their lunch or have a shortened lunch, realizing that they are in custody. They cooperate fully. And you will realize that I'm coming from back, I'm coming closer to the bench. We needed assistance of admin stuff to be done, and I could see the investigating team running around making copies, etc. I put a lot of strain on counsel for both the state and the defense. But similarly, you have made it much easier for me because of the manning and the professional manning you conducted yourselves, performing your function, prosecuting the case on the one hand, and defending your clients to the best of your ability on the other side. Last but not least, and I apologize if I've left out anybody in this process, our own staff, my own staff. You will recall that not all of counsel had sent me the authorities, and sometimes the references were wrong. But when it popped up on the screen, it was the correct case. It was work done behind the scenes. It is not the job of Ms. Nadia Chetty and Ms. Pilani Kwena and Sylvie Cook, and at the times Mr. Yankees and Mr. Blau was here as well. On Tuesday evening, rather Wednesday morning at 19 minutes past 3, we received documents. It wasn't sent to me directly. It had to go through the conduit. It reached me before I woke up. Counsel was assisted with all sorts of issues. If I didn't have the assistance yesterday of all three of them working with me at my accommodation on workers' day, typing, pulling out exhibits because I was dictating my thoughts whilst cooking, and either one of them had to go to my exhibit file and take out papers so that I can reference them. That's going the extra mile, but it shows the commitment, and I appreciate that. Now those are the pleasantries that are not part of the judgment. Now, as I've mentioned in the remarks I've made before I start this journey, although it is a criminal case where the purpose of the hearing is to determine the guilt or the innocence of persons accused of criminal conduct, this case primarily deals with Joshlin, a young child that is missing and is still missing. Now, there's a popular saying which often is overused, and it says that it takes a village to raise a child. It implies, among other meanings, that an individual is not alone, that a person is a person through other persons who belong to, and that, perhaps most importantly, that a child must be protected by those around in order to truly thrive in society. It has other implications too, if we take it seriously. For a village to raise a child, that village must be healthy. And the material conditions of that village must be such that the child can flourish. I remind ourselves that beginning here with the life of the child. In this matter, it takes on a certain point in time. Here we have a village where the child was not safe. This is not necessarily because of the community in which she was born and lived, as we can freely see through the public interest in the case, but because of multiple factors, including the material conditions of the community in which Joshlin was raised. A village does not exist in a vacuum, and nor is a child raised in a village alone. It is and remains the responsibility of the state, and in particular, taking it from myself, the judicial system to ensure that children are protected. It becomes our responsibility that every child that grows up in our village, in which it was protected to live as a citizen in society, that defends that protection. It is our role to ensure that all are protected, so that every child that is raised in our village can turn into an active, contributing member of society. And it's for one of these reasons that the act for which the three individuals are charged were enacted, I turn my attention to the preamble to the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking Persons Act, number 7 of 2013. And it reads, to give effect to the Republic its obligations concerning the trafficking of persons in terms of international agreements, to provide for an offence of trafficking in persons and other offences associated with trafficking in persons, to provide for penalties that may be imposed in respect of the offences, to provide for measures to protect and assist victims of trafficking in persons, to provide for coordinated implementation, application and administration of the Act, and to prevent and combat the trafficking in persons within or across the borders of the Republic, and to provide for matters connected thereof. Section 41(1)(b) of this Act provides for the establishment of an integrated information system to facilitate the effective monitoring and implementation of the Act, and to recommend interventions relating to trafficking in persons by collating and analyzing the information obtained in terms of sections 25(4)(c), 39(44)(1)(d), 44(5)(c), 44(7)(c, with a view to determining, amongst others, the establishment of integrated information systems, and so forth. The Act further provides for strict application, therefore the development of the monitoring systems. I may have done a cursory research, but I couldn't find a system that was accessible and operational in the implementation of the Act. Maybe it's time that something is done, as this is not an isolated case. Could be, as Ms. Swanepoel on behalf of the state argued, it's the first of its kind, but maybe we don't know, because it's not properly recorded, in order for us to be able to combat it effectively. Turning to the individuals before the court and the charges they face, Mr. Apollos was at the time of the charge 31 years old. Mr. Van Rijn was 27, and Ms. Smith was 33. I noted the other day when I signed the warrant of detention postponing the matter to today, that it was her birthday yesterday, on the 1st of May. That's also, I was reminded of that when I looked at the evidence of Ms. Michaela Daniels in the manner in which the date of birth was reflected. So if at the rest was 33, should it have been 35 yesterday? I mentioned the ages of the three individuals as it relates to the charge itself as well. They are charged with different offences and alternatives which have is that between the 18th and 19th of February 2024, in the Disappearance area in Procedural, that Joshlin was 6 years old at the time, born on the 23rd of October 2017, was trafficked. Therefore, the charges were brought under Section 4, 10(1)(b), read with 4(1), 10(1)(c), read with 4(1) in the Act. So it's a main and the alternate charges, and there was a second charge of kidnapping. Now, in the main and alternate charges, 3 components needs to be proven by the state. And I will turn to the question whether the means is in fact a necessary element with the victim is a child. But generally, the state needs to prove what was done. As the provisions of the Act is that any person who delivers, recruits, transports, transfers, harbors, sells, exchanges, leases, or receives another person, how, the means, and it then gives you a number of alternates, which would include kidnapping, the abuse of power, the direct or indirect giving or receiving of payments, and alike. And in the purpose, why it is done. It is clear, therefore, that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that an accused person committed any one of the listed acts as set out in the indictment by using any one of the listed means with a purpose or with an exploitative purpose. Now, it was argued on behalf of the state that international law does not require that in the event where the victim is a child, the means must be proved. And they relied specifically with reference to Section 11(1) of the Act. In this regard, on the unreported decision in State versus Becky Wellington, Asana, and 2 others, it's an unreported case from the Eastern Cape High Court, sitting in Quebec, under case number CC 16/2018 DCG. judgment was delivered on the 14th of June 2022. I pause to note that unfortunately, it seems that some of the judgments in the Eastern Cape didn't find its way to Saturday. I actually took it up in Sonnenburg with my colleagues in the Eastern Cape yesterday to alert them to it. This judgment was delivered by Joshlin, as his name was. And it dealt specifically with the charge under Section 4.1 as we are dealing with him. And the judge gave a full analysis of the law as well as the academic articles and referenced the international instruments. He came to the conclusion that if a victim is a child, it is not necessary to establish for purposes of the judgment here. This is an extemporary judgment. There's no need to explain further because it's clearly set out in Mazana by Joshlin. However, it's important that for the reasons set out there, I'm in full agreement with the exposition of the law and the conclusion reached by the court in Mazana. And insofar as it relates to this case, it is the law that I will apply to that extent. Means that there is a difference in the elements to be proven by the state where the victim is a child. It will become apparent later why I find it necessary to draw that distinction. Now, in an attempt to discharge the onus that rests on the state, they call 35 witnesses, handed in 42 documentary exhibits, 5 physical exhibits. We attended to an inspection in Loco, and this trial so far lasted us 35 days. I did not count the hours, but it was many. There was no evidence presented on behalf of the defense. The effect thereof was that the majority of the evidence either became common cause or it stands undisputed before the court. I'm conscious of the fact that insofar as it relates to certain witnesses, that I need to evaluate the credibility and reliability of those witnesses carefully. And I shall return to those witnesses in particular later. I have decided to state the facts which are common cause and or undisputed before the court. Not as is customarily done in a summary trial, where one summarizes the evidence fully, but rather
So I decided to start much earlier on my timeline from what the state suggested in the evidence that was produced before me. From the evidence of Ms. Celise Van Rande, who is employed as a social worker in the Department of Social Development, Ms. Smith became known to the department as a person in need of support as far back as 2016. She was the adoptive child of her grandmother, and from the file contents, as Ms. Mbongo was not in the employ of the department at the time, a predecessor recorded the information. Ms. Smith had an addiction problem that caused further tension in the relationship with her grandmother. As I indicated, Ms. Mbongo doesn't have personal knowledge of the information, and strictly speaking, that evidence is hearsay. It's a real challenge. Firstly, and there's no prejudice to Ms. Smith in admitting the evidence. Therefore, the evidence would be admissible in terms of the evidence of the inquiry as hearsay evidence that is admissible. That was 2016. During 2017, the grandmother again reported to the department, stating that Ms. Smith had another child. That child was Joshlin. The older son was in the care of the grandmother, for whom she received a social grant. But she couldn't provide the whereabouts of Ms. Smith, although reporting that she recently had a child, but they didn't know where she was. On the 20th of March, the next year, 2018, so Joshlin would have been approximately 5 months old. Ms. Smith attended to the offices of the department to seek assistance, as she was allegedly in an abusive relationship and needed help. Also for her own substance addiction. By then, Joshlin's birth had not been registered. Ms. Smith was then assisted by the social workers to register Joshlin's birth and to assist Ms. Smith to be committed to a rehabilitation center. That's the first time we also hear the name Natasha Andrews, because when Ms. Smith had to be committed, Joshlin was placed in the care of Natasha Andrews and her family. We heard the evidence of Ms. Andrews that they attempted to adopt Joshlin is important to note the relationship between Miss Andrews, Miss Smith, and Joshlin, as that relationship between Miss Smith and Miss Andrews will become relevant later. However, although they didn't adopt Joshlin during school holidays and often over weekends, although Joshlin was staying with her mother, she would often spend time with Andrew's family. During 2023, just now a few years later, Joshlin was then in grade R. Then it became school holidays. In other words, longer periods to be spent with the Andrews family. Regular contact would be between Miss Smith and Miss Andrews. Fast forward to a cold morning in August of 2023. The temperature this morning was 5 degrees when I was driving home. Mr. Nico Stephen Kutsia was on his way to work. He hails from the mountain, so does Miss Smith. He does general work at people's homes and is also an evangelist in the Christian faith. 2016 roundabout, he attended a memorial service at a funeral. That's where he met Miss Smith. Realizing that they're from the same area, they exchanged pleasantries. And although they didn't see each other regularly between them and 2023, when they would see each other, they were friendly. According to Mr. Kutsia, they could have been regarded as friends. And he referred to her, and she in turn, as his homie. During the process, she requested him to see whether he could procure a position for her doing domestic work with some of the people where he performed these tasks. On this morning that I spoke about, he was surprised to encounter her that time of the morning, as his initial impression was it was somebody jogging. She seemed upset and lamented about an unhappy family life. He wanted to know where she was coming from. And where she was going. He was unaware at the time where she resided. She pointed over her shoulder to a blue house and said she lived just behind that house. And she was on her way to do a cleaning job. She left the children She gesticulated with her hands and told him that in the next year, January or February, he will see what will happen in Middelbos and Diasville. It will look like a movie scene with cars and people. They will search, but not find. These were his exact words. She will let the child go far. He remembered her clothes as it was unusual for the weather conditions at the time. He saw her again during the September school holidays of 2023, where he saw Joshlin, and he described her eyes as the most beautiful that he had seen. It sounds better in the Namakoland way of expressing, as Mr. could see again. Miss Lorraine Lombard, whose evidence I will deal with in detail later on, lives a stone's throw away from Mr. and Mr. Apollos. They were friends who shared a lot, but they were also drug buddies. They would see each other on a daily basis, using drugs. From the available evidence, Ms. Smith seems to have been the provider of the financial means and often supported Ms. Lombard with food for the children, for her children, Ms. Lombard's children. Ms. Lombard had 4 children, of which 2 was living with her, and a partner, Amanda. On Sunday, the 18th of February 2024, the Apollos at Smith residence was visited by a detective inquiring about the loss of chickens on a nearby farm. The complainant in the chicken theft case was identified, and Ms. Smith's response was that she couldn't believe that this complainant would point fingers at Mr. Apollos, and that she would not take revenge by informing the complainant's wife of his infidelity. Stronger words were used. This led to a heated argument between Mr. Apollos and Ms. Smith that later on escalated to Ms. Smith breaking the window and threatening to stab Mr. Apollos. After the breaking of the window, Ms. Smith and Mr. Apollos were inside the house, where Ms. Lombard could overhear a discussion between the 2 of them. They were talking about Joshlin. It's instructive to note that Mr. Apollos, in his statement that was admitted in the trial within a trial that was made to Colonel Pretorius, confirms a discussion in the vein as described by Ms. Lombard. And in a separate interview with Captain Lombard with and also confirmed that both of the children were there. Miss Paulina Joshlin, not knowing any of the dramatis personae, was on her way to have her hair done in the late afternoon, early evening, as the time is not, she's not certain of the time. On that Sunday, the 18th of February 2024. The route to the salon would take her past the rocks close to the house of Mr. Thomas and Smith. She describes this argument that Miss Smith dragged Joshlin towards the house and uttered the words, "X on your face." I pause to note that it's unclear whether these words were directed at Joshlin or Mr. Apollos, having regard to the genesis of the argument. It was heated, according to Ms. Joshlin. She also recognizes Ms. Lombard, or describes somebody that resembles Ms. Lombard. It's also an aspect I will come back to later. According to Ms. Lombard, Ms. Smith then took Joshlin to a white polo vehicle and to a woman whom it would seem to be traditional dress. She had distinctive white spots on the face. She describes this person as a Sangoma due to the appearance. She saw Miss Smith receive something that she had placed in her pants, whereafter she returned to her house with Joshlin. She then tells us that she overheard Miss Smith telling Mr. Apollos that she received 20,000. Miss Lombard then approached Miss Smith, whilst Mr. Van Rijn was present. And in public inquiry, Miss Smith stated that she had sold her child Joshlin and had done something bad. Again, strong words were used. But for her sons, Miss Lombard will receive 1,000 rand and Mr. Van Rijn 1,200 rand. According to her, both she and Mr. Van Rijn accepted the offer. The next morning, earlier than usual, that was Monday the 19th of February 2024, Ms. Lombard went around to the Smith residence, where she found Mr. Apollos, Mr. Van Rijn, Ms. Smith, and the 3 children of the Smith. According to her, Ms. Smith would have given instructions of how the handover of Joshlin would take place around 2 o'clock the afternoon. Thereafter, Ms. Smith left with the youngest of the 3 children. Both Joshlin and her older brother did not attend school that day. The reason for this non-attendance, given to different persons at different times, changed between unwell and dirty school clothes. Turning back to Ms. Smith, She was working for Miss Collins and her daughter Kelly, performing general housework. On that morning, according to Miss Collins, Miss Smith arrived extraordinarily early. She received the keys to Kelly's house. Whether she went to work or not at Kelly's house became unclear at the later stage because Kelly's has a camera, CCTV, and no footage of Miss Smith can be found for the 19th of February on the recording. On the other side, middle post, Joshlin was still at home, where Miss Lombard, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Van Rijn were present. According to Miss Lombard, she exchanged
of hers for a quarter mandrax tablet, which was consumed by the 3 adults present. Cross-examination, it was disputed as to who partook in this consumption, but both Mr. Apollos and Mr. Van Rijn, in the statements they made to Colonel Pretorius and Captain Seacreed, confirmed that consumption. Turning back to the events of the 19th, at some stage before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Miss Smith was back at Collins' house, where she borrowed 50 rand and made her way home. Miss Lombard narrates that it was then that Miss Smith took Joshlin to the car, the same white polo from the previous day. Mr. Apollos, Mr. Van Rijn, and Nilo was present. According to Collins, Miss Smith was away for approximately a half to 3/4 of an hour. Miss Smith then returned back to her house in Middelpost, round about 5 o'clock, where after she, Mr. Apollos and Mr. Van Rijn took a gas canister to be filled. They bought some, took and smoked it. Mr. Apollos and Mr. Van Rijn had to collect money for items sold earlier, which included a microwave. It is interesting to note that Miss Lombard also refers to this. Joshlin was not on. Nobody is searching for Joshlin at that time. Miss Smith shows no concern. Mr. Apollos shows no concern. Mr. Apollos and Mr. Van Rijn later departed to Delmaki Street to go do their drugging thing for the rest of the evening. Exactly what time Miss Smith showed any interest in finding Joshlin is unclear. However, at approximately 8:20 that evening, she and another person, who could have been Namshla Tinsley, attended at the residence of Miss Andrews. According to Miss Andrews, Miss Smith inquired whether Joshlin was with her. When asked about Miss Smith's demeanor, she said she did not seem anxious to her. This was an opinion expressed by the witness I have indicated above. the long relationship and close relationship between Miss Smith and Miss Andrews. Miss Ntinzi and Miss Smith were searching at one stage, and at one stage they attended to a residence in Bitimukawa Street, which was a place identified where Joshlin could have been. Miss Ntinzi's concern was that Miss Smith spent an inordinate long time inside the house, and that the search was not continuing. Upon inquiry from her as to what the reason for the delay was, she was told that Miss Smith was charging her phone. It was thereupon that Miss Tinsley insisted they inform the police. This was now approximately 9:30 in the evening. The complaint was attended by Sergeant Kobesi and Constable Gongoda. They inquired at both the Zeger's residences, and as Miss Smith did not have a photograph of Joshlin, they collected some from Miss Andrews. After all the administrative work was done, and Mr. Apollos eventually found in Talmaki Street, a statement was obtained for a missing persons report from Miss Smith. This was Exhibit QQ. What stood out in that statement was that Joshlin did not go to school because she was, I quote, not feeling well. When she returned approximately 13:50, according to the statement, Mr. Apollos was not at home. And then there's some vagueness in the statement as to whether she was asking about the whereabouts of Joshlin or not, and whether the father was looking for the child, referring to Mr. Apollos. But in the same statement, hence my confusion, it's also stated the father last saw the child at about 1300 hours, 1 o'clock. No mention is made of Mr. Van Rijn. After all the work was done by the police, Mr. Apollos and Miss Smith went to sleep and were searching for the night. According to Miss Andrews, she saw Miss Smith early the next morning, and again, she did not look anxious. Now the police were mobilizing upon the missing persons report. Detective Molstein and Detective Sergeant Verfuwe were on duty somewhere in the Swartland when they were called back to Saldanha. Detective Sergeant Molstein took a statement from Mr. Apollos. 3 things stood out. He said, Joshlin in the cold makes no mention of Mr. Van Rijn, but at about 11 o'clock, he washed the children's clothes. Both of the children were home, as well as himself, when Miss Smith returned at lunchtime, where she remained approximately 20 minutes. Detective Sergeant Schoolberg went around to Miss Lombard. This statement brought a new issue to light. The presence of Mr. Van Rijn. The same morning, on the 20th of February, the class teacher, Miss Edna Mark, made contact with Miss Smith. And although she asked her twice about the absence of Joshlin at school the previous day, she received no answer. What also became apparent at the time, over and above a comment made by Miss Smith to Lieutenant Colonel Zabola, Station Commissioner, about a child making me famous, neither Miss Smith, Miss Lombard, Mr. Apollos, or Mr. Van Rijn participated in the search. Although many, and I stress many, police officials, community members, people from afar were searching day and night. But let's get back to the day of the 20th. Because that night, Miss Smith slept at the home of Kelly Zegers, and she gave an interview. Her concern was that this is not Kelly's concern. Kelly Zegers is concerned because Miss Smith is also known as Kelly. Was that Miss Smith showed no emotion and did not appear to be concerned about the missing child. She slept like a baby, whilst Miss Zegers couldn't. In the interview, the moment suggestions were made that Mr. Apollos could have been involved, she became aggressive. Now, on the 23rd of February, this is now a few days later, Miss Smith encountered at least two persons who testified in court. I returned to Miss Celise Benbaum, the social worker, because at the request of her manager, she had now become involved. And that was her first involvement with Miss Smith, to see what assistance they could give to Miss Smith, because she had a child that was missing. Miss Smith told the social worker that Joshlin did not go to school because her clothes were dirty and that she did not have any soap. A pause. Previous and in a later statement Miss Smith made, she says she went home at 10 to 2. Where did the soap come from that Mr. Apollos used at 11 o'clock? Whilst I'm at the evidence of Miss Mbambo, she told us about the attempt she made to get Miss Smith into a safe place, but Miss Smith was uncooperative. On that same day, the teachers participated in a search, and Miss Mark was at a filling station where suddenly Miss Smith appeared in the vehicle. It was then that she had told Miss Mark about this call she had from a seer that her child was on a ship on the way to West Africa. Then, before she alighted the vehicle, in a low tone, she said to Miss March, she must just remember that Buddha, Mr. Apollos, is innocent. Now, it would have been apparent from my summary so far that there were discrepancies in the reports that was now with the missing persons inquiry. From the 20th through to that Sunday, the 25th, Captain Lombard with one I draw the distinction because Miss Lombard has two A's in her surname. Who is attached to the provincial organized crime kidnapping task team, who also became the investigating officer at the later stage, or the lead investigator at the later stage. He had contact with Sergeant Milstein after difficulty in the beginning getting a hold of him, because Sergeant Milstein's telephone must have been overloaded with calls and so on. And offered his support to the team that was leading the missing persons investigation. Because as the title of the unit is, they specialize in kidnapping cases and come from the high onto the stations. And during that period, Sergeant Milstein had relayed to him his concern about these prima facie discrepancies. He then decided, or it was then decided, that he should travel down to this area to interview Miss Smith and Mr. Apollos. That first trip then happened on Sunday, the 25th of February. At the time, when interviewing Mr. Apollos and Miss Smith, he was aware of the contents of the statements, the interactions with the missing persons team, as well as concerns about their demeanor and their conduct in general. This raised red flags for him. Mr. Apollos confirmed in that interview that the two children, his Joshlin and her older brother, did not attend school because they were sick. And what he found strange was when he inquired from Mr. Apollos about his relationship with Joshlin, Mr. Apollos became evasive and referred the answer to that question to Miss Smith, who was outside at the time. He also confirmed that Miss Smith returned home during the course of the day to smoke tobacco. And although he couldn't give an explanation as to when and how Joshlin disappeared, he stated that both him and Mr. Van Ryn took turns in watching Joshlin. Mr. Apollos also confirmed that he did not partake in the search. And he confirmed the presence of Ms. Lombard on that day. Ms. Smith appeared irritated and confirmed that Joshlin was left with Mr. Apollos and the smoking of it. Captain Lombard was surprised by the response to a question when Ms. Smith said, and I quote in Afrikaans, "Meneer, my kind is nie meer in Saldanha nie. Ek moet aangaan met my lewe. Ek het nog 2 kinders. Sir, my child is no longer in Saldanha. I must go on with my life. I have 2 other children." When he wanted to know, but how does she know that Joshlin is no longer in Saldanha, she responded, "The child is gone. My kind is weg." According to him, she was emotionless and cold, not being involved in the investigation before the attempts of clarifying issues. Then he wanted to take a supplementary statement from her, supplementing the statement that was made on the night of the 19th, early hours of the morning of the 20th, to Kobesi and Gongota. Her response was even more surprising. She had no time to give another statement because she had to go to the spur with Mr. Apollos. This didn't surprise him. Well, this was not the only surprising issue. As what he found strange, here we have a mother, but she's not asking for an update on the investigation or what new information is available, but rather she said that Joshlin made a fetus. Michaela Daniels is a sister of Ms. Smith. She happens to be a police official in the Northern Cape. The 2 of them spoke on the 26th of February 2024. So this is the day after Captain Lombard's interview where the responses were given as I described above. Ms. Smith informed her sister that Joshlin was still in the area and that someone wanted to sell her child and that she is in the informal settlement. But it is too heated in Saldanha at the time. When she wanted to inquire further, Ms. Smith's response was that she knows Ms. Daniels is a police official, and she's now asking her the same questions the police have already asked, so she's not going to answer. On the question as to why did Joshlin not attend school on the 19th of February, she was told that Joshlin's school uniform was dirty and that Miss Smith did not have the money for washing powder. I've already referred to the 11 o'clock issue in Mr. Apollos' first statement. On the 22nd of February, before this interview, attempts were made to obtain a statement from Mr. Van Ryn, because one might find it strange as to why Mr. Lombard, Captain Lombard, when he spoke to Mr. Apollos and Mr. Smith, because there was not yet a statement of Mr. Van Ryn. The response from Ms. Smith to Ms. Daniels about the sale of Joshlin becomes apparent and important because of what happened on the 22nd of February at the residence of Mr. Van Ryn. When Sergeant Mosley arrived there, Mr. Van Ryn spoke to members of the community, and in that conversation, he already speculated about the sale of Joshlin. Sergeant Mosley, however, did not take a statement from Mr. Van Ryn on the day, because his impression was that Mr. Van Ryn was under the influence of drugs and he didn't want to take it further. However, Mr. Van Ryn did make a statement, and that was on the 29th of February to Detective Sergeant Philip Sechome, denying any responsibility for what happened on the 19th. On the 2nd of March, 2024, the then Minister of Police visited the area. But importantly, on that morning, Captain Lombard encountered Miss Smith at the police station. She was well dressed in a dark green dress and clearly had a hairdo. After some comments made by Captain Lombard as to how well she looked, she responded that Joshlin made her famous. I referred to the same sight and the same words to Lieutenant Colonel Sebola. This comment also found its way to Ms. Hanif, the so-called TikTok influencer. I'm just going to pause for a moment. I can see there's some activity going on. So when I return, I'm going to take a bathroom break. Some people want a bathroom break. Let's open the exhibits. Kelly's warning. When I return, I will continue on the events of the 3rd of March, because that led me to Ms. Hanif and her video. It's now 11:31. How long do you need? 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Let's make it 11:45 rather. It's 11:32 now. It's a 13-minute break. 11:45 when I will return. Cool. All right.